Hi guys, Levi here with 701 Cycling Sport. We are back with a snowboard edition of Mechanic Monday. The last time you saw me, we were discussing the side-on view like this, camber profiles, the different curves and different boards and how that all affects your riding. Today we're going to take a little bit different view, this top-down view like this, and the different shapes you see. What are the differences? How does all that affect your riding? In addition to that, if you're shopping online or in store, you see a sticker like this or a bunch of specs listed with numbers and measurements and terms. What is all that stuff? So the first one I want to touch on, it's called side cut radius. You zoom in a little bit here. The way I like to think of that is a giant imaginary circle taking a bite out of the side of your board like that. This radius is going to be a big number. It's expressed in meters. So this Burton cartographer is 154 centimeters is the length. That's measured in centimeters. The radius is measured in meters. This one has a 7-meter side cut radius. If you're comparing this to another one, a bigger radius is going to be a little bit more stable at speed. A smaller radius is going to be a little more maneuverable and easier to get edge to edge. In relation to that, we have what's called side cut depth. Zoom in again here. Now that's referring to the difference between waist width, which is right here, the narrowest point between your feet, edge to edge, that's your waist width. The difference between that number and your nose or tail width here, that's going to give you your side cut depth, generally in millimeters. So it's not going to be a big number. It's important to note that side cut radius and side cut depth are inversely related. So if you have a large radius, here's your giant imaginary circle up here. If you have a large number for your side cut radius, your side cut depth is going to be a little bit smaller. If you have a giant circle, it's going to be taking less of a bite out of the board. If your circles say something like this, it's going to be taking a deeper bite out of your board. So you'll have a larger number for your side cut depth. It's worth noting. Let's see what else we have. I'd like to point out some boards will have what's called the effective edge listed. That's the length of your edge here, this metal edge, that's in contact with the snow while you're making a turn like this. So your contact points here to here, the length of that edge. If you have a long effective edge, it's going to be stable at speed. If you have a short effective edge, it's going to be more nimble, a little bit easier to get from edge to edge. Another thing that I'd like to point out, if some boards don't have this, some do. Burton has it on theirs, most of theirs. It's called reference stance. Little crosshairs here sometimes. What that is, it's referring to the stance that they suggest, because that's what the board was designed around. It's the intended use. And for example, this one here says, here's your reference numbers, and it says -1. What that means, it's the stance in relation to the center of the side cut. Not necessarily the center of the board, but the side cut. In this case, a directional board, the giant imaginary circle, if you will, is set back a little bit. So the center of that is going to be back. This one is also, the stance itself is set back from that. So again, that's in relation to the side cut radius, not necessarily the center of the board. Lastly, what you might see if you're looking at just the top down, the obvious, the shapes, like a blunt nose and tail. This here is the T-Rice Orca. Okay, it's got goofy looking nose and tail. This thing is what's called volume shifted, so the waist width is a little bit wider to make up for, or to give you more float rather. And with that, you can kind of chop down the nose and tail so you can size down a board. Like for this one, you could size down 3 to 6 centimeters from what you would normally ride, because it makes up for it with volume in other places. That allows you to cut down on the swing weight on the ends of the board. If you're looking to spin, that kind of thing, that's an option. It can make for easier grabs. It also looks really cool. Let's be honest, I like the look of it. It can be as much about aesthetic as anything. Also, if you see a board like this, very directional, it's got a swallowtail here. The idea there is to get it down in the snow, to keep your nose afloat in powder. So you also see this big spoon nose with the swallowtail. This is a powder board. The idea is to keep the nose afloat and the tail down so you can stay afloat in powder. So also in relation to that, you might see what's called taper. That's the difference between the tail width, which would be right here, the widest point of the tail, and the widest point of the nose. This nose is going to be wider than the tail, so you might have what's called taper. Generally measured in millimeters. The idea there, if you have 0 taper, there's no difference between the nose and tail. If you have a large taper, that's to get the tail down and the nose up. It doesn't have to have a swallowtail to have taper. The idea with taper is to just kind of keep the nose up a little bit to give you a little bit more float. Large number, if you see the taper, it's going to have a little bit more float in the nose. So those are just some of the specs you might see on a sticker. You might see different brands might list different stuff. If you have any other questions, just leave down in the comments. Let us know. Thanks for tuning in.